Let's paint this cheerful sunflower together using a simple glazing technique in watercolor. I start by mixing Indian yellow with water to create a medium wash, and I'm applying it evenly across the paper. You can see I'm painting inside the sketched area, and I'm using the wet on dry technique for this first layer. Next, we are going to paint the center of the sunflower while the paper is still wet. I'm mixing permanent orange and sepia for painting the disc of the sunflower. The pigment mostly stays in place and doesn't bleed into the petals. If it spreads a little, that's perfectly fine. Just make sure it doesn't travel too far up the petals. Since the pigment doesn't bleed much here in my painting, I gently carry the color about halfway into the petals while the paper is still wet. However, I make sure to keep the top part of the petal clean and untouched by this mix of sepia and permanent orange. Using this same mix of permanent orange and sepia, I add soft shadows to the petals. When one petal sits on top of another, the one underneath appears a bit darker because the petal above casts a shadow on it. So I'm adding that soft shadow to the lower petal to show the layers more clearly. Next, I mix sepia with small amount of Prussian blue to create a darker tone, which I use to paint around the outer edge and middle section of the disc. Now I add even more darker value to add more contrast and definition to the disc of that sunflower. Now let the paper to dry completely. Once it's fully dry, I'm mixing Prussian blue with water to create a light wash and gently painting it over the background using the wet on dry method. This second layer is called glazing. It simply helps to create a soft green tone in the background without affecting the color underneath. As you add this Prussian blue around the flower, you will notice how the sunflower starts to come alive and stand out beautifully against the background. Now, here are two simple things to remember while painting the background. First is try to work a bit quickly. Since we are using the wet on dry technique, if we go too slow, the paint can dry unevenly and leave unwanted patchy areas. So it really helps to have your Prussian blue already mixed with water and ready to use on your palette. The second point is use a large mop brush for this step. A smaller brush takes more time to fill the area and the result will be with more patchy areas, and streaks. Now, after painting the background, you can tilt your board slightly to let the extra pigment collect near the tape and gently blot it with a cloth. This helps if you want a smooth finish. But for this sunflower painting, I actually chose to leave that little pool of extra paint on the paper. It created a soft cauliflower texture in the background, which I really loved it. To paint the background, I started with a large mop brush. Then, to quickly fill in the areas close to the petals, I switched to a round brush. After that, I used a sharp tip brush to carefully define the edges of the petals. As you have seen, I shared the sketch for this painting at the beginning of this video. If you are curious about how to draw it yourself, I have uploaded a step-by-step tutorial on my Patreon. It's a small bonus for those who want to support my art journey. But don't worry, everything else you need is right here in this video, so I hope you will continue enjoying the process. After defining the edges of the petals, I let the paper to dry completely. Now we are going to add some soft shadows using a mix of permanent orange and sepia. This will help to create a nice separation between the petals. Just you have to observe which petal is tucked underneath and add a gentle stroke along its edge. In this way, by adding the shadow for the petals, you create a more depth and dimension to the flower. Next, I'm using a mix of Prussian blue and Indian yellow to paint the stem and leaf of the sunflower. We have reached the end of this painting process. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more watercolor tutorials. See you in another video. Until then, take care and bye-bye from Prima.